Welcome back, friends, to another episode of Smith History, separating the Smith from the myth. The only podcast where the stories are true, the details are questionable, and the innocent bystanders are never quite sure how they got dragged into the cosmic chaos of Smith lore. Now, normally, Smith history is about the Smiths, our triumphs, our tragedies, our questionable decisions, and our uncanny ability to turn even the simplest situation to a saga worthy of a Ken Burns documentary. But today I induct a new, unsuspecting soul into the hall of Smith history. A young woman who did nothing wrong. A young woman who simply needed a ride to work. A young woman who, through no fault of her own, became entangled in the gravitational pull of Smith-level absurdity. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the story of Melissa, a nurse, a friend, a young woman of great faith, and, as of 2005, an honorary member of Smith history. But before I get to the breaks gone bad portion of the story, I need the backstory. Because in Smith history, the backstory is always the story behind the story. And sometimes, the story behind that story. It was 2005. I was a 20-year veteran of nursing, working at Grady Hospital in Delaware, Ohio. A busy med-surg floor where telemetry monitors beeped like overcaffeinated birds. Post-op patients needed everything right now, and chronic illness clients kept us humble, tired, and spiritually sacrificed. If you've ever worked med-surg, you know. You don't survive it alone. You survive it with your peeps. And one of my peeps was Melissa. Melissa was, and still is, one of the kindest, most spiritually grounded, most dependable co-workers I ever had. We've been through the wars together. IVs that refused to cooperate, catheters that had the structural integrity of wet spaghetti, medication passes that felt like marathons, and those days when the motto of nursing rang painfully true. If one person is having a bad day, everybody is having a bad day. And on the flip side, if one person is having a good day, everyone else is suspicious. Melissa and I lived just 25 miles north in Marion, Ohio. We were practically neighbors. I watched her kids grow up. We shared rides, shared stories, shared prayers. And we shared the kind of gallows humor that only healthcare workers understand. So on this particular day, for reasons lost to time, fatigue, and the fog of 21 years, Melissa needed a ride to work. The morning drive was uneventful. My car was fine. The world was calm. The brakes were functioning. Life was good. But Smith history has a rule. If things start out normal, wait a while. After a long day, the kind of day where your feet hurt, your brain hurts, and even your scrubs are tired, we walked out to my car, ready to head home. Now, I have always taken care of my cars. Oil changes, tire rotations, brake checks, the whole deal. Because when you drive 50 miles round trip every day, you don't mess around. So we got in my car, buckled up, and headed toward Marion on the back roads, the safer, slower, more scenic route. I always avoid the highways. They're too fast, too stressful. Too many people who think turn signals are optional. Little did I know, that decision may have saved our lives. We were chatting, decompressing, enjoying the quiet country drive when I noticed something. Something was off. My brakes felt spongy. Not needs to be checked next week spongy. More like, this is not ideal for two human beings traveling in a metal box spongy. I pushed the brake pedal. It sank. I pushed again. It sank further. Now, I'm no mechanic, but I know this much. Brakes should not behave like a memory foam pillow. At first, I didn't say anything. I didn't want to worry Melissa. Why ruin the peaceful ride? Why admit that the car was suddenly auditioning for a role in a disaster movie? But I did slow down. A lot. And Melissa noticed. She didn't say anything yet, but she noticed. Then we approached a small village. There was a stop sign. A simple, innocent, everyday stop sign. I pressed the brakes. The car said, "I'll think about it." We rolled through that stop sign like we were in a parade. Melissa looked at me. I looked at her. The stop sign looked at both of us in judgment. And finally I confessed, "Melissa, the brakes aren't working right." She blinked. She inhaled. She exhaled. She silently prayed. And then, because she is a woman of great faith, she said nothing. We were tired. We wanted to get home. 2005, I had no phone. I had no money, no way to call people for help. But, the brakes sort of worked. Not well, not confidently, but enough. So we crawled forward at a speed that can only be described as Amish buggy speed. Cars passed us. Birds passed us. A determined squirrel probably passed us. The cheerful conversation we'd had earlier evaporated into the evening air. We were focused, alert, silent. But even in the tension, we found humor. We joked that maybe someone at the hospital, a disgruntled patient, a jealous co-worker, or someone who didn't like how I hung IV bags, had cut my brake lines. And we laughed, nervously. Because in Smith history, even the jokes feel like they might be true. As we approached Marion, Lissa let out a sigh of relief that could have powered a wind turbine. The brakes were nearly gone now. 98% decorative, 2% functional. I pulled up to her house using every ounce of leg strength I had. The car stopped. Barely. And then we just sat there, silent, breathing, processing the fact that we had survived a 25-mile journey with brakes that had the structural integrity of a graham cracker. Then we laughed, hard, because sometimes laughter is the only reasonable response to absurdity. Melissa got out of the car. I was surprised she did not kiss the ground, though I wouldn't have blamed her. She just smiled. She kept her humor, and hopefully forgave me. And she did speak to me again. We worked together for years afterward, but for some mysterious reason, she never asked me for a ride again. Imagine that. I left the car on a side street, and I walked home. It was safer. The next day, the mechanic told me the truth. A rusty brake line. Not sabotage. Not a jealous worker. Not my wife Patty trying to collect life insurance. Just rust. Plain, boring, unglamorous rust. Which frankly is the least exciting explanation, but it is the safest one. Now, you may be wondering, what exactly makes this a Smith story? Let me explain. Number one, it's a simple situation that became an epic saga. Most people lose their brakes and call AAA. A Smith loses his brakes and accidentally creates a 15-minute podcast episode. Number two, innocent bystanders get swept into the chaos. Melissa just needed a ride. She ended up in a survival story. Number three, humor shows up even when it shouldn't. Rolling through a stop sign? Terrifying. Also, to me, somehow funny. Number four, faith and luck intertwined. Melissa had faith. I had God. And the car had, well, rusty brakes. Number five, the story gets retold for decades. Because in Smith history, if you survive it, you're going to hear about it again. The moral of the story, check your brakes, take the back roads, trust God. And if someone named Brian Smith offers you a ride, well, just know there's a non-zero chance you'll end up in a future episode of Smith History, separating the Smith from the myth.